There we go. It says we're live. At least it says we're live. Hi, my name is James. I am a programmer at Waterloo Public Library, and I'm bringing you this evening's program called Let's Explore the Night Sky. Now, this program is going to be recorded so that you can watch it at a different time. It'll be made available on our YouTube page and our Facebook page, I believe, as well too. If you have any questions, I can monitor the comments. The fancy dancy software I have working on my computer here will highlight any comments or questions that you may have. So if something does come up during the broadcast, you want to try asking it, ask it. Try to keep my eye on it and address it as we go along. That's the one advantage of watching things live. So before we begin, when you start talking about how to look for stuff in the sky, I have to give you a bit of a lesson in astronomy. I have some props here behind me. I have my fancy dancy globe and my soccer ball. We need the soccer ball. And I have a flashlight as well too. So we're just going to talk a little bit about the planet Earth, its relation to the sun and the stars in the sky, and why we see what we see in the night sky. So this is the Earth. It's a globe that you find at many schools or thrift shops. In the case of this one, I bought this from a thrift store a long time ago. And you notice with most globes that they come tilted on an angle. And there's a very good reason for that. That's because as the Earth, there we go, got to get things centered. As the Earth orbits the sun, the soccer ball is going to be the sun, it spins multiple ways. It spins on its axis. So this spinning is what makes a day. One full rotation makes a day. But it also spins around the sun. And one full rotation around the sun makes up a year. Okay? So depending upon where this is oriented relative to this, or the Earth is oriented relative to the sun, right, will help determine where the stars are in the sky and what we can see. Because, as we have it right now, I'm going to put this behind me so you can see it a little bit better on the screen there. We're going to put our Earth right here, and we're going to put our sun right there. Now, these things are definitely not to scale. The sun is much, much larger than the Earth, and this distance right here is much, much further away. The sun shines onto the Earth. That's what this flashlight is for. So the sun shines its light onto the Earth, and the Earth rotates. And that's how we get our sunrises and our sunsets. We are right here. Here's North America. Now, based on this angle, we have the sun. We have the sun shining onto the Earth right now. Based on this angle, and the angle that the Earth is at, we know that it's winter. Because right now, North America is leaning away from the sun. Leans away from the sun. In the summertime, so as this orbits around the sun, and it becomes summertime, North America is now leaning towards the sun. So the sun rays still hit North America, but this time they're coming in nice and tight. It's leaning towards the sun, and it makes it a lot warmer. And that's how we get the difference in seasons. Right now, it is the fall. Yesterday, or the day before, it was the first day of fall. And so the Earth's angle is right at the side. So it's pointing perpendicular to the sun's rays. So that's what happens on fall, and then the opposite happens on the spring. Now, there we go. When we have the sun shining on North America, let's get that back. When we have the sun shining on North America, that's daytime, and we can't see anything other than the sun in the sky. We can see the moon. We can see a little bit of the moon, because it still reflects just enough light that it's visible during the daytime, if it's in the right position in the sky during the daytime. But we can only see the sun and sometimes the moon. This side over here, there we go, this side over here is nighttime. These guys see all the stars that are all the way over there. See, all the stars are all the way over there. If there's any stars on the other side of the sun, we can't see them. We can't see them at all. So when things change, when the seasons change, we can see a different portion of the sky that's around us. So in the fall, there will be a different set of stars visible in the sky. And in the summer, there'll be a different set of stars visible in the sky. And in the spring, there'll be yet another different set of stars visible in the sky. So that's it in a nutshell, how the Earth and Sun can affect what we see in the sky, in the night sky. Now, the big question a lot of people ask is, what can I see? What can I see with my eye in the night sky? And the answer is a whole lot. Well, really a whole lot. It's actually, if only humans were a little bit bigger and our eyes were a little bit larger, it would be a lot easier to see some pretty neat stuff in the sky. But there's actually quite a few things, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So the first thing we're going to talk about, the moon. Everyone knows the moon. It's that great big white thing in the sky that we see. It goes through all of its phases. And it's probably fairly easy for you guys to pick out. Right now we have a moon that's heading towards the first quarter. So we're on our way to a full moon. And it's quite visible in the sky right now. It's in the southern sky, quite high right at the moment right now. So if you were to step outside, you could probably pick the first quarter moon fairly easily. Stars, you guys are all used to seeing. Stars are those little itty bitty points of light. They make up the vast majority of the little itty bitty points of light that we have up in the sky. Those ones are fairly easy to find. And planets are fairly common. Now, for those of you who may not know what a planet is in the sky relative to the other stars, there's all sorts of little tricks and tips I'm going to give you guys shortly to show you how to pick out those planets. Some of them are a lot easier than others, but after a little while, once you get used to recognizing the planets in the sky and the different times of year and things like that, that you can see things better than others, it gets to be pretty easy to pick them out. A good example would be Venus. Venus is the second closest planet to the sun, and it rises and sets in the sky early in the evening and early in the morning. And as we get darker, as it gets closer to winter, you can see it for longer. So all of a sudden, there'll be this great big bright dot of light that goes up and goes back down slowly. And it's fairly easy to pick out Venus once you know where to look. We do get to see comets on the rare occasion, very, very rare occasion. Really famous example was Neowise that was in our sky a few months ago. I think it was a few months ago. With the way the world is, it seems like a few decades ago sometimes. Comets are a very rare thing. So it's one of those things that when you do hear about a comet being visible in the sky, go out and look at it because you may not be able to see it for a while. Comets are great big icy snowballs. Go on very long orbits. They loop around the sun and head way out into the solar system and come back again. And a lot of comets have what's called a period, an orbital time, the length of time it takes for them to do one full orbit in the thousands of years, in the hundreds of years. So the odds of being able to see them are very slim. So when you do have a chance, make sure you take it and go out and see it. And the famous example, Halley's Comet, probably has one of the shortest periods out there. It's 75 years, but even then, that is a human lifetime. That is a human lifetime. Famous author Mark Twain was born when Halley's Comet came around and passed away when it came back again. So in the span of his lifetime, he didn't get to observe Halley's Comet. Another neat thing that we get to see, satellites. Satellites are man-made objects in space that orbit around us, orbit around the Earth. A good example that's been in the news and have been fairly easy to pick out and track have been the Starlink satellites that have been going up from SpaceX. They've been launching these little clusters of satellites in the hopes of providing worldwide internet. And they've been launching them in sets, and you can see them going across the sky in this little chain, this little train. So there'll be like a whole bunch of dots of light moving together in a single line, in a single strip, because they're all launched at the same time from the same main satellite. They are slowly spreading out over time and they're following the same orbit, the same path. So satellites you can actually pick out quite a bit. There's all sorts of websites and even apps for your smartphone to help you track satellites. A famous satellite, man-made satellite, is the International Space Station. And there are tons and tons of apps out there for tracking it. And again, once you get good at it, it's fairly easy to pick out satellites in the sky. Main reason being that something like, say, the International Space Station orbits the Earth once every 90 minutes. So it moves pretty quick. A lot of satellites move pretty quick across the sky. Like we're talking, they will pass from horizon over your head to the other horizon in the span of about 4 or 5 minutes. So you can kind of pace things out. You can kind of guess when you observe a satellite based on that. Satellites aren't airplanes, so they don't have flashing lights on them. So they're a single dot of light that moves at a consistent speed straight across the sky from horizon to horizon in about 4 or 5 minutes. And even then, once you get good at like predicting where you are on the surface of the Earth and where you saw the satellites relative to the celestial sky, you can punch in numbers onto websites on the internet and figure out what exactly you watched, what satellite you saw, because there's all sorts of websites that track those satellites. All right, now let's get into the meat of things. Talked about stuff that we can see. We're going to talk about how. We're going to talk about how we're going to do it. So how do we observe things in the sky and pick out stuff? Good first example is a star map. I have it right here behind me. We're going to use a star map. These things, you can find all sorts of printouts for these online. Just about every science-themed store sells these. There's very fancy ones that come all laminated and a lot bigger than this. This is just a simple paper one. This is a Canadian one. This is from the National Research Council. I believe you can actually order these from the National Research Council's website. These things are the bread and butter for any introductory night sky observation. So like I talked about at the beginning, the night sky changes based on the time of year. And the core part of our star finder is this little circle. And around this little circle, there are dates. It lists the months all the way around. And then these finer little markings here are the day of the month, right? So based upon what day it is, you match it up on this little thing that gives you the time. Okay, so right now it's about 8 o'clock. It's a little after 8 o'clock, and it's September 23rd. So I'm going to put my star finder in its holder. And I know it is 8 p.m. So it's 8 p.m. Right up on there. And I'm going to match up September 23rd with 8 p.m. There we go. I don't know if you can see that, but I have 8 p.m. September 23rd right up there. All right. This then shows you the observable sky. This is the observable sky above your head. Okay. This light blue band, right? This is the Milky Way. Now, if we weren't in the city, if you're pretty far out into the country, you'd be able to see the Milky Way. It's breathtaking if you haven't. Head up north, really far north, get away from any major cities, and you'll see this. When you get out to the far country and say it's a moonless night, so you're not competing with the moon for the amount of light in the sky, the Milky Way is quite capable of lighting up your surroundings so that you can see around you in the dark. It's very, very bright, but unfortunately, due to light pollution, it gets washed out because lights on the surface of the Earth are much brighter than these stars that are millions of kilometers away. All right. So this shows you the path of the Milky Way. This yellow line is a very important line. All right. It's called the ecliptic. All right. This is the line that you will find the planets orbiting around. The planets orbit along this line. So it's one of those things where, again, once you learn how to identify things in the night sky and where things are, you will notice that there's essentially a highway across the sky, a band across the sky where you will be able to find the planets. If the planets are within sight, they'll be somewhere along that highway, that band in the sky. It is the exact same band that the sun orbits through. So if you watch the sun over the course of the day, you will notice that it rises in the east, goes in a nice straight arc, and lowers in the west. Goes from east to west. And then once you get kind of good at identifying that path in the sky, when you go out at night, try to imagine the sun in the sky and you look along that path, try to find the brightest stars along that path. And those have a good chance of being planets. Planets are very close to us, much closer to us than just about every star except for our own sun. And they reflect quite a bit of light from the sun. So they look nice and bright and big. So like I mentioned, Venus is one that you will see along that path in the sky, usually a little bit closer to the west. You see it rising and lowering in the west early in the evening. Okay. Another popular three that you're more likely to see are Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Those are the other three. Those 4 planets, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, are the ones that you're most likely to see along this band. All right. Technically, it's also possible to see Mercury. It's just that it is so close to the sun and it rises and lowers so early in the day and early in the morning, and it only goes up a little bit. You need to have a really, really, really clear view in order to see it. Like we're talking, go to the Great Plains of Saskatchewan, in the middle of the cornfield where there's nothing higher than corn, and you'll be able to see Mercury rise and lower early in the morning and early in the evening. Okay. So this thing is pretty awesome. Now, one last thing for using it, if you're able to get your hands on one of these, on this, it marks the horizon. So we have the north, we have the south, we have the east, and the west. It is the opposite. East and west are switched, or north and south are switched, depending upon the way you're looking. And that's because when you hold this thing, I have it all lined up September 23rd at 8 p.m. When you hold this thing, you're supposed to hold it up over your head, up over your head. And right now, south is that way. So I'm going to point the southern part of my starfinder towards the south, up over my head. And it gives you an idea of the ecliptic, right, where it is, and where you're going to find the other major stars and constellations in the sky. These things are a lot of fun. They're really simple. They're very cheap. You can print them off for free from the internet. And it's a great way to get an introduction to your night sky. It's a great way. Oh, sorry. Star map. That's what we just talked about, or star finder. Now the next way, the next popular way, and this way I use too much now, smartphones. We have a fancy dancy computer sitting in our pocket that lets us do all sorts of really cool things. And just about every phone nowadays, Android and iPhones, have all sorts of free night sky. Excuse me. Whew. As you can see, I'm in my workshop. I think I hit a little dust. They have all sorts of fancy night sky tracking apps. Now, I have one. I'm not getting paid to promote this or anything. I just picked a free one that has augmented reality. I'll talk about that in a moment. It's called Night Sky for iPhone. It's trying to get me to buy it. I have the free version because I'm cheap. There's all sorts of free versions for both Android and iOS. Come on, close. These have what's called augmented reality. So as you aim your phone, it will give you the night sky. It will show you what you're looking at, which is pretty awesome. We can see right there one of the dippers, I believe, right there. I'm doing this backwards through a camera on a computer to my phone. Well, am I right? Yeah, Ursa Major. That's Ursa Major, the Big Dipper right there. Oh, and you hold it just right. It will even show you an imaginary image of Ursa Major, the Great Bear. These apps are amazing, because this is stuff that you had to learn by using a star map or a star finder, using books, doing research, asking people, learning how to figure out the coordinates in the celestial sky. Whereas these nowadays, you just point at something, you can zoom in on it, literally zoom in on it, and it'll give you more information. And you can do a lot of investigating and a lot of learning. Really cool part too, I don't know if we can show this. You can get the ecliptic in there as well. So that is that yellow stripe going up, and we can see the moon. Looks like the moon. Oh, I'm going to turn this a bit. Looks like the moon is starting to go down in the sky. So if we follow it, we follow the yellow line, we follow the ecliptic, and just about every app has this, I can see, looks like Jupiter and Saturn should be up in the sky tonight. It's pretty exciting, Jupiter and Saturn. And we can follow along. Neptune's there. Now, Neptune's another planet. You're not going to see it with your eye in all likelihood. You're going to need a telescope or possibly binoculars to see it with. And you can follow that ecliptic. You can even look and see what people down south can see if you're living down south. Apps like this even will track some satellites as well too. So if you see a bright line moving across the sky, you can try following it and see if you can figure out what satellite it is. So this is a great way, a great tool to use as a roadmap to figure out what you're looking at in the sky and where things are. All right. So we can observe quite a bit, but right now all we're really observing are points of light. We're seeing dots in the sky. We want to see something more. I want to see colors. I want to see rings on Saturn. And in order to do that, you're going to need some form of magnification. You're going to need some form of magnification. It's really, it's one of those things that's really crazy. If only humans were a little bit bigger and our eyes, our pupils a little bit larger and our lenses could focus just a little bit further, you could actually see Jupiter and Saturn in the night sky. But right now, they're just outside the periphery of our vision. They're just blobs. I've always wondered whether or not an elephant could see Saturn. They have their eye is big enough and the lens can focus. But in order to observe stuff like that, in order to see colors and interesting things, at the very least, you're going to want to start off with binoculars. Binoculars to take a look at the night sky. I am not a big fan of binoculars, but I do know some people who swear by them because they're multi-purpose. Not only can you use them to observe things in the night sky and see some cool stuff, you can use them to observe nature as well too. So if you're into birding or looking at moose, if you're up in Algonquin or whatever, you don't want to get too close, you can use binoculars for that as well too. So they're kind of multi-purpose. Now these binoculars in particular, while they look small, are pretty cool. These are special binoculars just for observing the sun. I bought these back when we had our last eclipse. It wasn't terribly expensive, but you can observe all sorts of interesting things regarding the sun. And all you need are just a simple pair of binoculars like this. These have very special filters in them. I can't see anything when I look through them right now, even staring at lights and things like that. They block out the vast majority of the light, but the sun is quite capable of shining through these at a safe intensity so that I don't hurt my eyes. But there's all sorts of neat things. You can even buy cheap little paper glasses that you can wear over your eyes that have filters glued into them that allow you to observe the sun as well too. But binoculars are definitely a step up. The reason I don't like them too much is because they're not very stable. You're holding them with your hands and you get a lot of little movements. If you can find a way to stabilize yourself well, you get your elbows on a table or something, you'll use like a picnic table outside, you could use the binoculars a little bit better, but even then, little tremors in your hand and things like that make it hard, I find, to really enjoy the observing experience. But like I said, some people really like them, like for all sorts of reasons, right? So binoculars are one step in the right direction. Most binoculars, you're going to be able to see those major planets. So Mars, Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter, the big four, are probably the easiest that most people have access to in latitude to see. You're going to see with binoculars, and you're going to see them fairly well, even with fairly low magnification binoculars. There are a few other objects in the sky that you would be able to see with binoculars as well too, but it gets a little trickier. We're going to talk about them in a little bit, but right now we're going to talk about just one last thing you can use to observe the sky, and that's a telescope. Telescopes come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. But there are two major varieties of telescope. Got one here and one here. So these two telescopes I have are introductory telescopes. These are fantastic for looking at planets, like I mentioned, so those big four. If you have the right filters, you can buy filters so you can observe the sun as well too, and that's pretty cool. You can do that as well. But yeah, so these are fantastic for any introductory astronomer. So this one here, it's called a refracting telescope. It is a refractor. I'm going to see if I can try to get the light just right. No, I don't think I quite have the right lighting set up to show you. There's a bit of a shroud here, a guard, and then there is a glass lens. So refractors use lenses in order to collect that light and focus it down the tube and eventually out the bottom into an eyepiece and into your eye. So yeah, a refractor uses lenses, glass lenses. I'll put that cap back on to keep it clean and safe. And the other one, aside from refractor, they had to name things as closely as possible to make it as confusing as possible for any students, are reflectors. There we go. There we go. You can see a bit of it in there. Reflectors reflect. They use mirrors. They use mirrors. So this is a Dobsonian reflector. It's a very, very popular reflector, type of reflector. So for this one, the light comes in through the top here, goes down. There is a reflective parabolic shaped mirror that then focuses the light up. Then it hits a secondary mirror in there. I know it's kind of hard to see. Oh, there you go. Kind of see it. It hits a secondary mirror, which then bounces the light out here. As you can see, a reflector is a lot shorter than a refractor because a refractor collects the light, goes through the lens, and gets focused down the length of the body. So it needs to be nice and long. A reflector collects the light and focuses it down the body, back up the body with a mirror and out this way. So it kind of does double work. It does double duty. So this one section of tube has light going down, bouncing off, and coming back up. Both are excellent options for anyone interested in getting their own telescope, their own first telescope. And these ones this size would be just fine. You can do a whole lot with them. We're going to talk a little bit more about what you can do with them in a few seconds. The major difference is really, it comes down to preference and a little bit to price. It used to be that these guys, reflectors, were far cheaper. They're far simpler to build. Fewer materials, it's not as long. Making a reflective surface, a mirrored surface, is a lot easier than grinding a glass lens. So typically, refractors, the glass lens variety, are a little bit more expensive for an equivalent reflecting telescope. Typically. There's some variation, but really that gap is getting smaller and smaller by the day as technology improves and people's preferences change and things like that. Either one is an excellent option. There is really no benefit. When you go out and buy a telescope or get a telescope, the biggest thing, the most important thing to be concerned with is how much light it can gather. The more light you can gather, the more you can see. Both of these telescopes, I believe are both 70 millimeters. So this has a 70 millimeter glass lens, and this has a 70 millimeter reflective mirror in the bottom, right? Both do the exact same sort of work. You will see the exact same objects at the exact same magnification, at the exact same color levels and brightnesses. They do the exact same thing. It's just this one is probably just a little bit cheaper. But again, it comes down to personal preference. Big downside to this one is that it's so small and it has its own stand. These ones often come with their own stands. They're often called nudger telescopes because you just nudge them a little bit at a time to try to get what you want to see. Because the stand is so small, it's easy to knock around. Bigger telescopes like this require a tripod, which in my experience is far more stable. It's its own unit that sits on the ground, that you put on the ground nice and level, and it stays fairly still. But again, a lot of it comes down to personal preference. With either one of these telescopes, you're going to see just about the four major planets just fine, and you'll see what's called the Messier objects. Now, that's something I wanted to talk about a little bit. I'm going to share my screen. So this is the cool stuff. Just gotta get, I want to go here, share screen, share entire screen. There we go. We've got a bit of an inception thing going on. You can see the software that we use to do these broadcasts. So telescopes were invented, discovered about 350 years ago in the 1660s-ish. There was a patent filed for the first telescope somewhere around that time, but no one's really quite sure exactly who did it. But shortly after that patent was filed, Galileo put together his own telescope and became famous for observing the night sky. But then there was this other guy a little while later called Messier. Messier, has a very interesting story. His sole purpose, all he wanted to do, was to find comets. And in the process of scanning the sky with his telescope to find comets, he came across what's now known as the Messier objects. There's 110 objects in the sky that he discovered, that he used his telescope and to scan the night sky looking for comets, and he came across these things. The only reason he documented any of these was that he was frustrated with them. He was frustrated with them because he was looking for comets, and he would come across, an interesting blob of light in the sky, and he would get all excited and be like, "I found a comet," and then discover it wasn't a comet. And then every once in a while, he would discover it again, scanning the night sky the next night. So he started cataloging them so that he would know this isn't a comet. You're looking in this part of the sky, you see something, it's not a comet. So this was his comet reject pile. But they became very famous objects because they're fairly easy to find. Way back when Messier was around, telescopes weren't nearly as good as they were today. And these objects, a lot of these objects, are just on the periphery of our vision. We can barely not see them. But with a small telescope, any introductory telescope, and even with some binoculars, you can see a lot of these objects. Now, I'm hoping you guys can see my mouse moving around a little bit on here. Some of these objects, like this one here, number 51, are galaxies. You observe galaxies far, far away, right? You can see pretty nice shapes, and this looks like one galaxy eating another galaxy. You also observed a lot of stellar clusters. So there's areas in the sky. Pleiades is a very famous example you might have heard of, where there's just this grouping of stars, a whole bunch of stars together. It's not a galaxy. They don't think it's a galaxy, but it's just a whole bunch of stars. Nebula, those are the ones that everyone really wants to find, everyone really wants to see. Nebula are the remnants of stars, often are the remnants of stars, either when a star went nova. So our own sun is going to go nova in about 3 billion years, I believe. So it's going to swell up to be a red giant, and then it's going to push off that outer shell and become this nice big glowing ball of gas in the night sky. It'll swallow up the Earth. I believe it'll swallow up to Mars. The outer gaseous planets may survive. But our own sun is going to become a stellar nebula at some point. It's going to do a nova and just leave behind this nice, pretty streak of light in the sky. And then the last one that you see, the really dramatic ones, are the supernovas. So the ones where the star exploded and shot off its outer shell in this great big explosion. You get some really neat patterns, like right down here. All of these objects you should be able to see. Some of the, with a telescope or binocular, some of these you can make out very, very lightly with your own eye, with the naked eye. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and go back to seeing myself again. There we go. So a lot of these objects you can barely make out with your eye, with the naked eye, but when you use just a pair of binoculars or you use a telescope, that's when you start to really get to see the colors and the interesting things in the night sky. A lot of these apps on the phones will mark these off. So there'll be an object in the sky. It'll be M32. That's Messier object 32. That's the 32nd object Messier found. And even some of these star finders will have some of the big ones marked on them. I don't know. I'm not seeing any on this one. This one doesn't have any mark, but some of them do. Some of them do. That is the part that really gets you going. That's the part that's like, wow, I see something colorful and interesting. Oh, looks like I have a question. Oh, just a thank you. That's all. Yes, we will have this recorded. It will be saved on our website for you to observe, to watch later on. All right. So there's all sorts of neat colors that you can see when you start looking at those Messier objects and you start using the star trackers on your phone and things like that. Other big things. Sometimes you hear people getting all excited about planetary transits and occultations. A planetary transit is basically when one celestial object, or a planet in this case, passes in front of another celestial object. Usually that's only the sun, just because the sun is so big and all the other planets are so small. It's pretty easy to see it go in front. Ones that are more likely to see transit the sun are Mercury and Venus. People also get excited about man-made objects transiting other things, not just the sun. Some people do get excited about, say, the International Space Station passing in front of the sun. You can see its silhouette quite nicely. You can also see the International Space Station transit, so pass in front of the moon sometimes. Very rarely you can even see it pass in front of a planet as well too. The other big one that people get excited about are occultations. So that's when something moves in front. So that happens often with both the sun and the moon. They will occult. They'll move in front of something and block it from your view. Occultation was what was used to help verify Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein theorized that gravity affected space-time, and that when the sun moved in front of the star, there would be what's called lensing. So the light from the star would bend around the sun. And that was actually observed at one point to help verify Einstein's theory of relativity. We also get that, and there was a really famous example that happened April of 2019. Sorry, I'm going to go back to screen share. I want to show you. Saturn was occulted by the moon. I'll show you the pictures that were online because it was a very well-known phenomenon and people took all sorts of pictures beforehand. So this is Saturn moon occultation, Google image search, and you can see there's Saturn poking out from behind the moon. Here's a good one where it kind of gives you an idea. You can see the curvature of the moon, and then you can see Saturn. So you can see Saturn lit up quite well. Saturn really, like, again, it's so big and yet so small. It's so close to us being able to see it, and being able to see its rings with our naked eye. You just need a good pair of binoculars and you can see it fairly well, right? So lots of people got all sorts of really good pictures of the moon occulting, so moving in front of Saturn, blocking it out from view altogether. I just did a whole lot of talking for about 40 minutes. So I'm just going to throw it out there one last time. If anyone has any questions, I'll just keep an eye on the comments. So you can ask questions in YouTube and Facebook, and it will automatically get notified to me, and I can read them and answer them. But other than that, I think that's pretty much it. So first steps for what I would recommend you do, look up Starfinders. This one, again, was available from the National Research Council. The website listed on it is www.nrc-cnrc.gc.ca. I think you can still actually order these. The website, there's another website on here, www.star-finder.ca. I believe you can order these. But again, if you look up Starfinder and add printout to your Google search, you should be able to get a printout of this. There's free ones all over the internet, and it just requires a little bit of cutting, maybe a little bit of folding and stapling, and you can make one of these fairly easily. If you have access to a smartphone and a data plan, download one of those augmented reality night sky applications. It will let you in real time be able to see the night sky. If you want to go even further than that, then I would definitely recommend binoculars or an introductory telescope. and the night sky awaits. It's pretty cool. It's a lot of fun. And you get to learn quite a bit of history and things like that. So I don't see any questions. I'm going to say that's it. Thank you for watching, for observing me talk quite a bit from my dusty garage. I just want to highlight, I have a program coming up, I believe in November, where you sign up for it via our WPL.ca through our programming section. We're going to be sending out these telescopes. Not just this telescope. It's going to come with a tripod. It's going to come with lenses. It's going to come with a little laser finder that mounts right here. It's going to be a 4-week program. You take the telescope home. We get together once a week, kind of like this. I talk a little bit and give you some instruction how to use it. And you try to discover the night sky using the telescope you get to keep for 4 weeks. When it's done, you have to return it, but I'll give you lots of information about what to do if you're interested in buying one yourself. You want to investigate that option. But yeah, keep an eye on our webpage. I believe early in the month of October, registration is going to open up. We'll start advertising the programs a little bit in advance, and then registration will open up, and the first 10 people to sign up be able to sign out one of these telescopes to use at home. It's getting nice and dark, but still just a little bit warm. So hopefully we won't freeze our butts off learning about the night sky. So that's it for me. Thanks again for coming on out. If you have any questions or want to fire me an email, my email address is jgoertz@wpl.ca. jgertz@wpl.ca. That's all. Have a good night. Bye.